All right, so here we are, back at it. And what we just finished doing was we classified the population into different parts. And so we pulled out part of the population that's not able to work, not old enough, or is in an institution. And so we called that group that could work potential workers. And then we broke that group into a number of different components. Those who are not in the labor force, the gray area, those who are employed, the sort of teal, and those who are unemployed, the green area. And now what we're going to do with those classifications is develop some statistics that help us summarize this as a fraction of the population. So we have three main statistics that we're going to use here. We have the unemployment rate, which is going to tell us something. And the unemployment rate is going to be equal to the total number of people unemployed, those without work that are looking for work, divided by employed plus unemployed. And if we want to make that a percentage, we'll multiply that by 100. So that's the unemployment rate. So remember, the employed plus the unemployed is the labor force. So this unemployment rate is also equal to the number of people unemployed divided by the labor force times 100. Or remember that the labor force is equal to employed plus unemployed. All right, so the unemployment rate then is telling us what percent of the labor force is looking for work. Okay, so that's going to be important. That's going to be a statistic you're about to hear a lot about in the next few weeks. The unemployment rate is going to go up significantly, and so we want to have an understanding of what exactly that thing is telling us. So next here we have the employment to population rate, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the number of people employed divided by the potential workers, or a working age population. Sorry, made a mistake there. So not population, but we have potential workers. Potential workers, and again we can multiply that by 100 if you want to make it into a percent. So it just tells us of the people that are potentially workers, what percent are actually employed. And last but not least here we have the labor force participation rate, which is the labor force, employed plus unemployed, divided by the potential workers. And so the goal of that obviously is to capture how big is this group of those who are not in the labor force. So of the potential workers, how many are either working or looking for work, meaning they're in the labor force, employed or unemployed. All right, so, still getting used to this new technology here for using this information. So before I kind of move on to this information, why don't we just take a look here. So I'm going to switch over to a notepad, and we can use this hopefully here to look into what the current numbers look like. So I'm just going to kind of round up what we had before. So we had 95 million people that were not in the labor force. We had 157 million who were employed. And we had 6 million who were unemployed. So let's take a look and calculate our statistics based on this. So notice, by the way, if we take the total of this, our potential workers is 258 million. 258 million. And inside of that, we have our labor force, which is 163 million. And by the way, if you hear kids screaming in the background, it's my kids screaming in the background. So I'm at home here, as many of you are, and so we have the bumps that go along with it here. Okay, so our unemployment rate is the number of people who are unemployed, which in our case is 6 million, divided by the labor force, which is 163 million. We multiply that by 100 to make it a nice percent, and we have the unemployment rate currently in the U.S. economy at about 3.68%. So about 3.7%, 3.6%. That was in the previous month. So that's not going to be the case anymore. The unemployment rate is likely to shoot up here within the next few weeks, at least above 10%. We'll see how much further above that it's going to go. But we'll get there and understand that as we learn a little bit more about labor markets here. So the unemployment rate, about 3.7% of the labor force was looking for work. So if we look at the employment to population ratio, we take the number of people employed, 157 million, divided by the potential workers, 258 million, times 100, and we get about 60.85%. So right around 61% of people who could be working are actually working. So that's not extremely high historically, but not too bad either. Certainly much better than it was a number of years ago. Okay, so if we look at the last statistic, the labor force participation rate is the size of the labor force, 163 million, divided by the working age population, potential workers, 258 million, times 100 to make it a percent, and we get 63.18%. So about 63% of people are either looking for work or are currently working, or participating in the labor force. So certainly not too exciting to calculate these statistics, but in the next example, we're going to get a chance to see why knowing these is going to help us know something about what direction the labor market is going in. So I've got an example here that I want you to give a try. So we've got 1 million people that are unemployed, and they're going to become employed. And I want you to recalculate the labor market statistics in each case. And then I want you to go on and do the next example here, example 2, which is a similar change, only the 1 million people from unemployed go to not in the labor force. And I want you to recalculate the statistics and compare these two different examples. And so I'll have the solution written up and available on Canvas, and so you can kind of compare the work you did to those things.